Luke sat by his apartment window, the rain tapping lightly on the glass, his mind a whirlwind of confusion and frustration. For as long as he could remember, he had dreamed of becoming a renowned architect, building structures that would stand the test of time. But after years of trying, his dream felt as distant as ever. He had sent dozens of applications, attended countless interviews, and yet nothing seemed to click. He couldn't shake the feeling that every door was closing in his face. What was the point of all this effort if nothing ever worked out? God, why am I struggling so much? Luke muttered under his breath. I've tried everything. Why am I still stuck in this cycle of failure? It wasn't just his career that felt like it was falling apart, but his faith as well. He had always believed that God had a plan for him, but now the thoughts seemed distant. It felt as if his prayers were unheard, his hard work wasted. Each rejection seemed like a reflection of his inadequacies. In moments of self-doubt, he questioned whether he was cut out for the path he had chosen. Maybe I'm not meant for something bigger, he thought, feeling defeated. His mind wandered to the dreams he once had of designing skyscrapers, grand public buildings, and spaces that inspired people. Now, they seemed like illusions, far removed from the reality he faced. The thought of giving up crossed his mind more than once, but something deep inside him refused to let go of that flicker of hope. Maybe I'm just not good enough, he thought again, as he stared out into the stormy night, trying to silence the growing ache in his chest. It was during those quiet moments of doubt that he heard something in his heart, a whisper that didn't quite come from his mind, but from somewhere deeper. Trust the journey. You are exactly where you're meant to be. The words weren't loud, but they carried a weight, as though they were meant to steady him in the midst of his uncertainty. The night grew quieter, the storm fading into the distance, and Luke, still confused but comforted by the peace that followed, allowed himself to close his eyes and believe that somehow his path would make sense in time. The next day, Luke found himself in a situation he hadn't expected. It wasn't his style to attend social gatherings when he was feeling low, but something compelled him to meet with an old friend, Emma, who had invited him to a local community event in the park. Emma had always been supportive of him, and she was now volunteering for an outreach program in their neighborhood. Hesitant, but willing to take a break from the pressure of his own thoughts, Luke decided to go. He figured that maybe some fresh air would clear his mind. The event was lively, with families, children, and local residents gathered in a circle. There was music, laughter, and a sense of togetherness in the air. Luke watched from the sidelines, unsure of how he fit into this scene, when Emma spotted him from across the park. She waved excitedly and walked over. "Luke, I'm so glad you could make it," she said, offering a warm hug. They talked for a while about the event, about life, and about how things had been for Luke lately. She listened intently as he shared his frustrations with his job search and the endless rejection letters he had received. "I know it's tough right now," Emma said thoughtfully, "but I think you might find something here that could help." She introduced him to Mr. Johnson, a retired architect who had been a mentor to several young professionals in the field. Mr. Johnson had a way of speaking that made Luke feel like he wasn't just hearing words, but receiving wisdom. They spoke for hours, and in that time, Mr. Johnson shared his own story, one filled with failure, setbacks, and moments when he thought he would never succeed. "Luke," Mr. Johnson said, his voice gentle but firm, "I'll tell you something that took me a long time to learn. It's not our timing that matters, but God's timing. You'll face challenges, but remember this. God's plan for you is bigger than anything you can imagine. Trust in that plan, even when you can't see the road ahead." Those words struck Luke deeply. For the first time in a long while, he felt a small sense of peace, like he was hearing a truth that had been waiting for him to accept. That day marked a turning point. Luke didn't feel an immediate change in his situation, but something had shifted within him. Maybe he didn't need to figure it all out right away. Maybe trusting the journey, as Mr. Johnson had said, was the key. For weeks after that conversation, Luke threw himself into his work, poring over designs for a new project at a small architecture firm he had joined in the hopes of gaining experience. The work was challenging, the team inexperienced, and the firm's resources limited. It often felt like they were building a house of cards that could collapse at any moment. The constant pressure left Luke feeling drained, questioning whether this path was truly worth it. Late nights became the norm as he reviewed blueprints, made revisions, and tried to teach his younger colleagues how to approach the work with more precision. It was exhausting, both physically and mentally. One evening, after another long day at the office, Luke stood before his desk, looking at a set of plans he had designed for the firm's upcoming project. Despite his best efforts, he felt like they weren't good enough. The fear of failing was suffocating. His mind raced back to the feelings of doubt he had felt not long ago. God, is this really the plan for me? Luke thought as he looked over the work, frustration building in his chest. I've given everything, but I don't see how this is leading anywhere. Just as he was about to give up, he remembered the words of Mr. Johnson, "Trust God's timing." It was then that Luke understood. The frustration, the long hours, and the exhaustion weren't signs that he was on the wrong path. They were a part of the process, a preparation for something greater. Even though he couldn't see it yet, God was working behind the scenes. Luke closed his eyes for a moment, took a deep breath, and said a simple prayer. God, I trust that this is part of your plan. Help me to keep going, even when it's hard. That night, something within him shifted. He didn't know how or when things would change, but he began to understand that the journey wasn't just about reaching the destination. It was about learning, growing, and trusting that every step was leading him toward his purpose. As the months passed, Luke's hard work began to pay off in ways he hadn't expected. The firm, once struggling, began to see some success. Clients took notice of the dedication the team had put into their projects, and slowly, their reputation started to grow. But it wasn't just about the business that was thriving. Luke began to see the transformation within himself. As he took on more leadership responsibilities, he realized he was not just designing buildings, but shaping the future of the firm. His colleagues began to look to him for guidance, and he found himself mentoring younger architects, helping them navigate their own challenges. It wasn't the path he had envisioned. He had once dreamed of working with the best of the best in the most prestigious firms, but Luke started to realize that God had been preparing him for something far more meaningful. His influence wasn't just about the work itself, but about the people he was inspiring along the way. The more he mentored, the more he felt a sense of purpose. One day, the project manager pulled him aside and said, "Luke, I don't think we could have made it this far without your leadership. The client loves what we've done, and the recognition is pouring in." Luke felt a wave of gratitude wash over him. It wasn't just about the success they were experiencing. It was about the growth that had taken place, both in the firm and in him. He had been tested, stretched, and challenged in ways he never imagined, but the experience had shaped him into a leader, someone who could make an impact. That night, as Luke lay in bed, he realized that his journey wasn't just about the work he did. It was about the lives he touched along the way, the lessons he had learned, and the faith he had developed in the process. God's plan was never just about his career. It was about his purpose, and that purpose was being revealed to him step by step. The challenges seemed to keep coming, one after another. The firm hit a financial crisis that threatened to undo all the progress they had made. Projects were delayed, clients pulled back, and layoffs seemed inevitable. Luke felt as though he was back at square one, questioning his ability to weather yet another storm. He felt like he had fought so hard to get to this point, only to watch everything slip through his fingers. The weight of the situation felt unbearable, and his old doubts resurfaced. God, I'm doing everything I can, Luke thought, sitting alone in the office one evening. Why is this happening? Why does it feel like every step forward leads to 2 steps back? He prayed for guidance, asking for clarity and peace in the midst of the uncertainty. That Sunday, Luke went to church, feeling exhausted, both physically and spiritually. As he sat in the pew, the pastor shared a message about trusting God's plan, especially in times of struggle. The pastor read from Jeremiah 29, verse 11, "Asterisk, for I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you a hope and a future."